Look at this South Tampa property. Why did it end up in such disrepair? Do you think it is worth fighting for? Local Tampa attorney Terri Gaffney thinks so. She has been fighting a legal battle for 6 years to regain this homesteaded property Ms. Gaffney claims was unlawfully seized by a judge in 2017. Her story is a complex one of family battles, questionable judicial rulings and behaviors, and many twists and turns. Ms. Gaffney's story and her case should shock everyone in the state of Florida who has homesteaded property and thinks that property cannot be seized. Ms. Gaffney not only wants to regain the homesteaded property and get the property back into good repair, she believes an investigation should begin immediately for how this ever happened in the state of Florida. Stay tuned for an exclusive Eye on Tampa Bay interview with Terri Gaffney and a statement from her attorney. I'm Sharon Calvert, and I'm with Eye on Tampa Bay. Today I'm in Tampa with Terri Gaffney, a local Tampa attorney, to talk about a legal battle that she has been fighting for the last 6 years. Terri, thank you for being with me today, and give us a brief description. How did this start?
It started because I was trying to take care of my father. And in 2009, I purchased his property because he had run out of money due to the fact that my sisters, through the use of an attorney by Philip Bowman, were able to divert all his funds away from him. So I purchased his property. I gave him a life estate so he could live there the rest of his life, and I kept a remainder interest. And I paid taxes, did the upkeep, put a new roof on for him, all sorts of things, so he could live there comfortably until he passed away. And he didn't have to pay rent or anything like that. He lived there free.
And that property was homesteaded?
It was his homestead property. He passed away December 26, 2011, and in January 2012, I transferred it legally to my daughter, and it was her homestead property. It never lost its homestead status, in other words. And it wasn't a probate asset because it passed outside of probate like all inter vivos deeds do, or inter vivos transfers or life estate deeds do. It's not a probate asset. In 2014, which is beyond this, when you can challenge this deed, two attorneys by
So that was beyond the statute of limitations.
That is correct.
Saying.
Yeah. Two attorneys by the name of Michael Kangas and Philip Bowman, who were my sisters who had been disinherited by my father, sued me because of their unpaid legal fees from my sister suing my father years earlier. And they have sued me. Well, they tried to take the homestead property of my daughter. And what they did is, they said it's a probate asset. Well, inter vivos transfer, the deed was never a part of the estate, so they could never claw it back. They tried to accuse me of exploiting my father, which is bizarre because the testimony, if the court had let us present it, would show I actually paid for my dad while my sisters through these attorneys were siphoning off all of his money. And the other part about that, it's my daughter's homestead property, and homestead property is sacrosanct. So
homestead property is not supposed to be seized in order to pay off a creditor, correct?
That is correct. And that is protected by the Constitution of the state of Florida, which is very, very, it's the best protection you can have. The legislature can't change it, the courts can't change it. It's only the people of the state of Florida can change the Constitution, and that has not been done.
So they continued this case against you for a number of years. And give us a little insight into the experience that you were having within the court system itself.
Well, what is interesting is I sit on what's called the Judicial Nominating Commission. I was appointed in 2011 by then Governor Rick Scott, 2015 by then Governor Rick Scott, and reappointed in 2014 by current Governor Ron DeSantis. And what we do is between, if a judge retires, resigns, for whatever reason leaves the bench, we select the judges in between election cycles. And this happens more than people realize. And so in 2015, a candidate came, I was investigating, because we investigate the people we were going to send up to the judge. And I called their references, we called people about them. And one of their references for this particular candidate was Judge Paul Huey. I'd never met Paul Huey, had never talked to him, didn't even know him. And I get on the phone with him, and he starts acting incredibly bizarre, asking me if I was married, if I had kids, if I were happy in my relationship. And I said, sir, this is inappropriate. All I want to do is talk about this particular candidate. He went further, said some pretty lewd things that I won't go into here because I find them disgusting. Wanted to have a relationship, wanted to get together.
And you'd never even talked to the man before.
No. And so then what happens is he starts making very derogatory remarks about then Attorney General Pam Bondi, which were just horrible, and then referred to Governor Scott as nothing but a thief, and wanted a pay raise from the governor. And he told me to call your governor and give me a pay raise. And I said, sir, this is inappropriate. We're going to terminate.
A lot of inappropriateness there.
Yes, and he says, if you don't, I will get you and ruin your life and ruin your reputation. And I said, sir, this is inappropriate. And I hung up. I find out later that this is a pattern behavior of this judge, that he's done this type of behavior in the past.
And you have some affidavits.
Yes, that were actually put into the court file.
So what happened when right after that phone call with Judge Huey?
Within a few weeks, there's a hearing in my case, and lo and behold, he's the judge. In the hearing, with transcripts, with the court reporter there, so we have the transcripts, he intimates that he and I are having an affair. He then says, he makes comments that he's going to ruin my reputation, and says stuff like, I belong in Romney world. This is in 2016, which Romney wasn't a candidate, or we still haven't figured out why he said that. It was a little strange. And then apparently later that day meets privately with the opposing counsel about our case, which is communications that are not proper. A judge
without you being represented.
Correct, and without us even knowing that they were meeting. And then a few weeks later, he writes this horrible draconian sanctions order saying I had done all these terrible things, which I hadn't done, which the attorney who we let go had done. He failed to notice me of some things that were going on. And he said, well, I forgive this attorney. I'm blaming all Ms. Gaffney, just like he promised he would do in that despicable phone call that we had. And so I file an affidavit saying, no, this is what really occurred. He was then taken off the case, and he can no longer be on any cases that I have.
And he has not been.
And he has not been. The affidavit is uncontroverted. There are actually witnesses who want to testify as to the facts, as to the pattern of behavior, but the courts have never allowed us to do that. So this sanctions order that he files strikes all my pleadings. So a lawsuit that's filed after the expiration of statute of limitations on property they have no right to get, and all sorts of things that aren't true, the judge says, oh, that's it. The case is over, you lose. And
without you having an opportunity to plead your case?
That is actually correct. And the judge is Judge Rex Barbas. When brought to the fact that there was improprieties that Judge Huey did, he sits there and goes, I don't care. I didn't think they were bad. Which is a shock, because I don't think that making lewd, suggestive remarks are proper and appropriate in any kind of situation. And it wasn't just, it went beyond saying, oh, you look nice today, or that's a nice outfit. It went beyond to lewd sexual comments. And Judge Barbas is like, I don't have a problem with that. So what Judge Barbas then does is he enters a default judgment and seizes the homestead property that is my daughter's, that we were all staying at, and we have 15 minutes, and they evicted us, and we had to leave.
And when did that nightmare occur?
That was October 25th, 2017. In that eviction, they have trampled the rights of the people of the state of Florida, not just mine. He says in a hearing 2 years later that he took the property, the homestead property of my daughter, as a sanction against me for discovery orders he issued. If you look at the docket, Judge Barbas never issued one discovery order. So that's not true.
So it's almost like you made it up.
Yes, for
out of thin air.
For lack of a better term. And the problem with all that is you can't take homestead property as a sanction. And so September of 2019, we're in court because we're trying to get my daughter's homestead property.
And Judge Barbas was still the judge
at that time. He was. And he says in open court with a transcript So we have his words verbatim. He said, I took the homestead property of your daughter as a sanction against you for discovery orders I issued, and there were no discovery orders. They don't exist. And the first thing is, you can't take homestead property as a sanction. More importantly, you can't take the homestead property of another person for the sanctions of a third party.
Somebody else.
And all of this is in contravention of the Constitution of the state of Florida. No one's home is safe in Florida. No one's.
And when you had 15 minutes to get out of that home, you haven't been able to go back ever since. You haven't been allowed on the property.
That is correct. Nothing is there. We couldn't walk out. We lost everything. Pictures, photographs, everything is gone.
Including your pets?
3 pets. Yeah, they were
There was
killed.
an issue with that as you were leaving.
Yes,
Yeah.
and it's very sad because they're gone. And
my understanding is there's a couple of cars that you were unable to leave the property, and they're still there today. Is that true?
that is true because they wouldn't let us get our car keys. So
You were whisked out
correct.
quickly
Correct.
and then barred from returning.
Correct. And in fact, and yet at the same time, they're filing, they're responsible, the 2 attorneys, Kangos and Bowman, for having code violations. But they said if we ever went back on the property, we would be arrested. So,
Yeah, you can't have both things going on. They're wanting to enforce the code violation on you as if you own the property, yet they're saying you don't.
yes. And luckily for Hillsborough County, we actually have a judge who's fair because we had a code enforcement hearing yesterday, and that's her precise question. Judge Margaret Taylor was saying, how can she be responsible for taking care of it when she's not allowed on it? And Judge Taylor also, in her dicta, said that homestead property cannot be taken as a sanction. Judge Taylor is a county court judge, and I think was shocked that homestead property was taken. My impression.
Mm-hmm.
But she did say that homestead property could not be taken as a sanction.
So under Judge Barbas, though, what happened with him?
Well, he was just making our lives miserable, attacking us every way he can. And then on November 5th, 2019, something odd really happened. He's at a board meeting with several attorneys and an appellate judge sitting on the 2nd District Court of Appeal.
Which is where you would appeal if you were going to, correct?
Right, and I did have a writ, I do have a non-final appeal that was
Already filed?
already filed at the time.
Okay.
And we were not there. I was not there, my attorneys weren't there, my daughter wasn't there, but these attorneys and judge, so there are good judges and attorneys apparently, because Judge Barbas started talking and he started having normal conversation. He was talking about remodeling he just did on his house, his condo, a vacation he was taking, his desire to buy property in the Smokies in North Carolina, and then flips into saying to the appellate judge, he goes, I don't want you ruling for Gaffney and Sussman. And he was saying, do you have any cases with them? And thank you for not ruling for them. Don't rule for them. They're into vexatious litigation because they appeal my orders. And apparently everybody at that table was flabbergasted because I got phone calls saying this occurred. It is unlawful or unethical for a sitting circuit judge to ask a sitting appellate judge about cases presently in front of him. And that is called, again, ex parte, and it's wrong, and it's a breach of our system of justice. Mm-hmm. And I don't think the people are real pleased that a judge is trying to, for lack of a better term, influence an appellate court. 2 days later, he's in court. I'm not there. People were not there. He says in open court, I have talked to 6 judges about this case.
So he admitted?
He admitted it. So he then has to get off the case, but he's still controlling it because he's assigning judges to my case because he is administrative law judge. But the real concern about this case is I've spent millions of dollars fighting it. They have taken homestead property that you can't do. So when people think, oh, I have a home and it's safe and it's secure, it is not. A paid up home that we purchased from my father and paid for was taken unlawfully.
And currently, though, today there's an issue where it looks like they're trying to sell your home. And you have it on appeal, correct?
I have it on appeal. The attorneys on the other side have made statements. They have manufactured an order that doesn't exist. They said that the probate judge gave them the authority and the permission to take the property. There is no such order that exists. The probate judge did never order them to seek the property back to return to the estate, because it couldn't. That probate judge could never have issued that order, because the property that I purchased was never an asset of the estate. So there are a couple issues that people should be scared of. If you buy property and somebody dies, you buy property from someone who dies, the probate court can take it if they didn't pay me back. They just seized the property that I paid for. So,
and you fought a legal battle for 6 long years trying to make that correct or get your property back.
And we can't because I outed a judge for his sexual improprieties. I am being targeted by a lot of the judges, and that is not fair. So the law and the reasoning has come in here that judges can strip deeds beyond the statute of limitation. Judge can take property that you pay for, and if somebody dies, they're going to put it back into the estate and not compensate you for what you paid for. They're just going to steal it from you. The other part about it is homestead property is not safe. This isn't Cuba. This is what people are telling me. This is what they did in Cuba. They walk and knock on your door and tell you to leave, and you have 15 minutes and seize your property. Your homestead.
That was one of our founding principles.
Yes.
What makes our country different?
Right.
Exceptional.
But you can't take homestead property as a sanction. And what has happened is the 13th Judicial Circuit has just eviscerated the Constitution of the state of Florida by allowing a judge to take homestead property as a sanction. And it's not even my property they took. It's another person. So that means if somebody is mad at you, one of your friends, they go, well, that's her friend, we'll just take her homestead property as a sanction against Sharon. That's the ruling. And that's what it means. And nobody in Florida is safe. And judges have just gone beyond the limits of the Constitution and the statutes. Our legislature enacts statutes like statute of limitations, homestead exploitation, and all this. All these statutes are put on the books by the legislature. The judges don't have the right to change it.
Right, and sometimes those statutes are a result of abusiveness of certain things that do occur.
Correct. And it is abusive to go back years, say, I'm going to strip the deed of a person who paid for that property. He stripped the deed that between my father and me in 2009 as a sanction. Property I paid my father for. And why did I have to pay my father? Because these attorneys created a phony trust, and they, along with my sisters who were disinherited, siphoned money off from my dad. All documented in the court file. Copies of the checks, everything.
So you're in the Court of Appeal.
Yes.
And what is the next step?
Just to do some briefs and some oral arguments, and actually to let the public know, because I think people need to know what's before them. Because if you get in litigation and the judge says, I don't like you, I'm taking your property.
And in the meantime, you have not been allowed to maintain the property.
That is correct.
So the property is overgrown, it hasn't been maintained, and that becomes an issue. That becomes another issue.
That is correct. And I don't know how a court can say the property that you bought in 2009 but wasn't attacked until 2014, long after you could attack it. I paid for that property and they took it. They unlawfully took my property. That is not the United States of America. That's not the democracy that you and I know. It is tyrannical behavior.
Terri, this is an astonishing story, and the public probably has no idea of the risk of their own property they could have. So if you have some closing remarks, feel free.
I think that the public should be astounded and upset. I think there needs to be an investigation as to this behavior, because we all go around saying the Florida Supreme Court says homestead is your castle. We strive to keep people there, and the first thing they do is steal homestead property that was paid for and had to be paid for because the people who stole my homestead property stole from my father. And this is all because it stems from Judge Huey saying, I will get you. I will ruin your life. And he did.
Thank you, Terri Gaffney. Again, we're here in Tampa. This is EyeOnTampaBay.
My name is Sheldon McMullen, and I'm an attorney representing Terri Gaffney. I'm standing here in front of the home that she and her daughter used to reside in. It's a property that's been in dispute since around 2014. The family was kicked out in October of 2017, and it's sat vacant like this ever since then. This was the homestead property of Sarah Sussman, and the title was voided as a sanction for alleged conduct that Terri Gaffney, her mother, did when the judge stated that it was for the violation of some orders. These orders do not exist and are not in the record. Never in my more than 18 years of practice have I seen something that is such an injustice. It shakes the foundation of the law, as homestead property has been taken in violation of the Florida Constitution. That is something that just needs to be investigated, and it needs to be investigated now because it can affect you. Other people could be in similar situations and see their homestead property taken in violation of the Florida Constitution by creditors that are not supposed to be able to get to homestead property. The reason this is so urgent right now is because it's now trying to be sold. The reason this is so urgent right now is the litigation on this is not final. There is still active litigation in addition to cases pending with the 2nd District Court of Appeal. And yet, despite this, there are orders out there and there are attempts to try to sell this property. So this needs to be investigated, and we need to protect the rest of the citizens of the state of Florida.